Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwartner, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we are talking about the number one coaching strategy to improve performance. What does that mean? We want to have an intelligent conversation about how to coach and when to coach and who to coach. And our experts today are Scott Cassidy, who's Chief Revenue Officer with Aslan Training. And welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Gerhard. Thanks for having us.
And Tom Stanfill, he is the CEO of Aslan Training. Welcome, Tom.
Welcome,
Scott,
Gerhard. Good to see you again.
It's awesome. Scott, why don't you kick us off and introduce the real Tom Stanfill and tell us what we can expect from the webinar.
Absolutely. Gerhard, thanks again for having us, and we are thrilled to be with you all today to talk about the number one coaching strategy to improving performance. I am very proud to be here with one of our co-founders and the CEO of Aslan. He's also the coaching myth buster. You'll figure that one out in a few minutes. But
coaching.
he's going to talk to us and take us through. We're going to do a little bit of an interactive approach to this. So I'll get Tom up here to talk a little bit about where we're headed with the next 45 minutes of content, questions and answers that you guys all put in to the registration process, and we're looking forward to getting to all of those. But Tom, a little bit of an introduction of yourself and maybe tell us where we're headed over the next 30-45 minutes with content.
Yeah, I love this topic because it's such an easy, simple strategy that almost really changes everything related to our biggest barriers in coaching, which is desire and time. So we say another way to say desire, motivation. So it's like, how do we create the desire to change, and then how do we find the time to coach? And the strategy that we want to share with you, which kind of back to a little bit about my background, is we've spent 25 years at Aslan working with either sellers or leaders on how we can improve their performance. And so as we discovered probably about 10 years ago, we discovered this simple thing that's, again, which is what we're going to share today, on how you can sort of take this one little pill that makes a huge dent into the two biggest barriers of coaching: motivation and time. And as you said, it also kind of reveals the biggest myth in coaching.
Yeah, and so I know we talked about that up front, and we do call you the myth buster. So what is that big myth that exists in coaching today?
Well, the biggest myth, simply stated, is that you coach everyone. People just naturally assume that I've got, let's just say, 10 team members, and I coach everyone. And actually, that's a myth. You don't coach. You treat everyone the same. You treat everyone with respect. You want to invest in everyone, but you don't coach everyone. You've got four, as we're going to explore, you've got 4 different team members, and you need to have 4 different strategies. So let's kind of dive into how we want to get you to look, maybe a different way to look at your team. So the first thing you need to define, if you haven't defined it, is what are the results that are required. And I know this is an obvious thing to talk about, Scott, but a lot of people don't. Maybe they've got the line defined, but they haven't revisited and communicated it clearly. And this line really drives motivation. If you can define results, it really drives motivation. If you think about your high performers, there's been research about what motivates high performers, and they want to know that you're going to hold the line. This line defines the game, right? This is the game that I'm playing, and I can't win if I don't know the rules. So knowing the game and holding that line motivates high performers. It also motivates people that tend to be low performers because they don't want to own the line, right? They don't know what they've really signed up for. They want to blame you or blame the organization for, why they can't hit their results or why things aren't happening the way they need to. And so when you define that line and they say, yes, I'm agreeing to producing those results. And once they verbalize that, they've got to own it. And so that's really key, is to first define the line.
Excellent.
So then the other axis that we need to look at is the desire. Now, the required results line, I think most people understand, and they've thought about it. Maybe they need to articulate it more clearly, but probably it's in place. The other line, which we've in all the organizations we work with, most of them don't define this line. This is the results. This is the desire line. In other words, there's people on the team that have a desire to change, and there's people on the team that don't have a desire. And so here's how I define desire. When they're waking up in the morning and they're going through their typical routine, getting dressed, fixing coffee, they either are excited about coming to work and getting better, or they are trying to hide and kind of like, I don't want to deal with management. I don't want to change. I just want to do my thing and be left alone. And then there's other people like, I want to grow. I want to strive. I want to get better. So that's what we mean by desire. They're intrinsically motivated to change. Now, the question, Scott, a lot of people have is, well, how do I determine what's the desire? How do I determine desire? The easiest way to determine desire is to implement some sort of developmental plan or implement a developmental activity. For example, let's just say that they need to work on, your seller or team member needs to work on their discovery skills, okay, or their ability to discover needs. So the developmental activity may be, okay, Susan, let's work on developing a discovery framework so that you can do a better job of leading discovery. And so by Friday, we want you to develop your framework for how to lead a discovery meeting. Now, come Friday, they've implemented that and developed that framework, or they haven't. Their attitude doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how they respond to what you say, whether their head's nodding. Only thing that matters is whether they do it or not, right? So don't focus on attitude, focus on action. That determines whether they have the desire to change or they don't have the desire to change.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, you've used that term, desire determines development, right? And we've talked a lot about this whole idea of it's all about action, not the attitude. Attitude's great. It's great to have people that say the right things and act the right way, but if they don't do the work, we got a problem.
Yeah, and a lot of people get confused by the attitude, like they seem to agree and they're very nice. Or on the other hand, someone may really argue with you or debate you about what your recommendation is because they maybe want to know. All of that doesn't really matter. What matters is that you define something that the rep needs to work on, and then they go and work on that. And if they do, then that means they have the desire. So it's effort that they put into that determines desire. So now that you've got sort of those two axes, you can see that you now can look at your team through a different lens. You have achievers. These achievers are above the line. They are hitting their number and they want to get better. The strivers are below the line, but they want to get better, right? They want to make the team. Achievers want to be the best. Strivers want to make the team. They want you to implement. They want to work with you. They want you to implement a development plan. Detractors are below the line and they don't want to change. Independents are above the line. They're hitting their number, but they want to just remain status quo. They don't want to change. Now, what the detractors want is they want to stay in denial. They want to blame everybody. They don't want to really look at that results line. They just kind of want to keep doing their thing, complain, and that's a big time suck for you as a leader. When you think about working with your team, if you're trying to develop independents and detractors, you are wasting your time. And what we've learned is most leaders are spending about 2 months a year with independents and detractors trying to coach them, and it's not going to yield results. You only coach achievers and strivers. As you said, Scott, desire determines development.
Yeah.
Right. If they don't, so I kind of think of it this way: is you want to hold a coaching session. The key that opens that door is desire. If they don't have the desire, you can't coach them. You can't force somebody to learn how to play golf, play the piano, or learn to dance, or anything that requires skills. If they don't want to do it, you can't coach them. You're wasting your time. And so a lot of people think, well, is that fair? They're the ones that are determining whether you develop them or not. You're not saying, I don't want to develop them. Matter of fact, you need to communicate. I would love to work with you. When you get that developmental activity, when you've developed your discovery framework, we're going to go to work. We're going to practice it. But if you don't do that, there's nothing for me to do with you.
Yeah. No, it's such a good point. Now, Tom, you know, coaching is, I think, probably one of the most misunderstood terms. It's why we're doing this webinar. How do you think most leaders that you've worked with define coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I do think a lot of people throw around the word coaching.
Yeah.
Hey, I had a coaching session. Actually, most of the time it was a management meeting. Coaching is about, there's like, we're just talking about the numbers. It's about a scorecard, or it's a conversation. Coaching is not a conversation. There's three distinct elements to coaching. One is you diagnose. And in order for you to diagnose, you have to observe. So for me to know your capabilities as a seller, I need to watch you sell. So yes, I can diagnose knowledge gaps, but that's not, capability is a blend of skills and knowledge. So I can't observe skills without putting you in a situation where you can reveal your certain skills. The other thing about coaching is alignment. Okay, so we diagnose what the gap is, which means I have to observe. Then there's the alignment stage where we agree on what gap we're going to work on. And then this is where a lot of the energy and investment goes. It's the development stage. So diagnose, align, develop. Develop is where you go and practice. And it takes time to develop that new skill. And you want to work with them until the skill has been developed and mastered, because then it becomes a habit. So we want to think about building a wall. Right? And so to put a brick on the wall one at a time, we have to work on that new skill until it becomes automatic. And so they don't have to be thinking in discovery, well, what question do I ask? And what do I do next? And what are the different types of questions? And, oh, I was supposed to listen. And all those things running through their head, they're not going to be natural. They have to get to a point where it's automatic. And then once that brick's on the wall, then you go work on the next brick. Well, this is where coaches waste time with independents and detractors, because the independents and detractors are not interested in building the bricks or building the wall. They're like, I don't want to change.
Yeah.
So that's how we need to think about coaching, and not confuse it with management or even leadership. And we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. Excellent. We've got a bunch of questions that came in, in the registration process. Are you ready for a few of those? Can I fire away?
Yeah, let's make sure we answer the questions. And
Yeah.
of course,
So
anybody else that's on the call that would love to chime in, obviously enter those questions in chat, and Gerhard will share those.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take some questions that came in around coaching. Tom, the first one, and I don't have names associated. I'd love to give credit to the folks that to ask these, but you know who you are. Most coaches see their team as top, middle, or bottom performers. It sounds like that. Sounds like this changes the way coaches should look at their team. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that is a very common way to look at your team. You have top performers, mid-level performers, and lower tier performers.
Yeah.
But here's the problem with that. If I have a top performer, they could be an independent or an achiever. So think of it this way. I have 4 types of reps. I need 4 types of strategies. And so I would work with an independent completely different than I would work with an achiever. Now, but they're both top performers. It could be a low performer. So let's say the low performer could be a detractor or could be a striver. Most of my investment in energy, and you can see in the chart and the table, that strivers, you should spend your most time with your strivers. That's where you're going to get the greatest ROI on your coaching investment, is getting those strivers above the line. Achievers usually require less time. They need to be more challenged. A lot of times you may need to find achievers other people they can work with, or mentors, or give them some sort of assignment where they can grow. But strivers is where you need to spend a ton of time, which are low performers. Detractors, you should spend very little time until they demonstrate they want to get above the line. So that's, I would look at it like this. That's our recommendation versus top, mid-tier, and lower tier.
Good. Excellent. Yeah. And I, if I'm one of the folks on the line, I might be thinking percentages. Like if I've got 4 quadrants here and 4 different people, what I think I'm hearing you say is that I'm not going to spend any coaching time left of this line, right? All my time is going to be right coaching time now. We're going to talk about other
coaching time,
but coaching time. So,
exactly.
You said most of the time is going to be spent with strivers versus achievers. 75-25 sound right? Something like that?
Yeah, something like probably 70-30, 70% with strivers, 30% with achievers.
Excellent. All right.
And so what you a point about achievers, a lot of times when we're working with organizations and helping them learn how to sell more effectively or lead more effectively, achievers will tell me, I can't learn anything more from my manager. And that's fine. Hey, if you've worked together with your manager for over a year, you may have learned all that you need to. And if you're the type of leader that's really focused on helping your reps grow, find some other resource for your achiever.
Great.
Right. And don't take it as an ego blow or blow to your ego. Look for other ways to invest in them or provide opportunities for them to grow. And that means less time is required of you, and you can work more with the strivers.
It looks like
Gerhard
has
sounds like we've got chimed in. We've got Gerhard chimed in.
Can you elaborate on the independence a little bit more? We have a couple of questions where people may be confused about how to deal with the independent type.
Well, we're going to talk about that next. So we're going to spend the second half of this webinar on how to specifically address the independents and detractors.
And can you elaborate on do you have any suggestions and ideas when you have a desire conversation, especially with a rep who thinks they have the desire? I think it's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Yeah, when the rep doesn't know they don't have the desire. So, and we'll talk about this, but I think I want to answer that now. If you're very prescriptive about implementing a developmental plan, or something developmental, some developmental activity where there's a clear line is drawn, they either did or did not do the work. That tells you that there's a desire problem. Now, there are 4 different kinds of barriers, and that's what we're going to talk about next, is maybe how do we address some of those barriers, and specifically with the detractor. So we'll get into that, but and it's the reason I want to cover that later, because I'm going to set up a couple of concepts and principles that will be helpful when we talk about how to work with detractors. But great question, because that's one of your biggest challenges. The thing to remember, though, is the line. The line is non-negotiable. The results line is non-negotiable. So whether they have the desire to change or they don't have the desire to change, regardless of their attitude, the line is non-negotiable. So if they don't want your help or they don't want to change, then you say, fine, you don't need me to help you, but here's where you need to be at this time. Right? We need to have, right. Well, and they may blame shift, and we'll talk about how to address that here in a minute.
Perfect. Let's do a couple more questions on the coaching side of things before we move on. What if I have a brand new team, Tom? What impact does the newness or the maturity level of my team have on this?
That is a great question. I love to see that question. Treat them all as strivers, because if they're brand new, just assume they all have the desire to change. Right? They all want to get better. They all want to make the team. And that's probably true because they're new. But and since they're new, they have to be below the line in results. So you just you got 100% strivers. Now that means that you're going to have to spend more time coaching. And so that's going to have to be a decision and a discipline that you make, is say, I have to spend this much time coaching and at least need to work with them a minimum of once a week. So, which is a challenge. So if you've got 10 team members, you're going to have to work with all of them. Now, there's ways to work with them efficiently, and I think we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But you've got to invest heavily in your strivers, and so you need to assume that. Now, as you start to work with them and you start to recommend developmental activities, hey, let's work on our build value capability by coming up with our responses to some of the biggest challenges we get from the customer, and they're not willing to do that. Now I'm going to move them over to the detractor role. And remember, making that clear fork in the road by saying you don't want to change, right? That doesn't make you a bad person. That just means you don't want to change. You want to figure it out on your own. That's fine. The line is non-negotiable. So when you want to work with me, I'm right here. So this doesn't mean you treat them like they're less than. You still need to invest in the relationship, but you just don't go to the driving range with them and work on their swing, or you don't go to the dance floor and work on how they dance, or whatever else you're trying to teach them, whatever analogy you want to use. because they don't want to change. And so that helps them own what they're thinking.
Excellent. All right. Next question is about how do we spot the exact time to coach a member of a team, especially when our rep to coach ratio is off? In other words, I've got way too many reps on my team.
Yeah, this is a very important question. So the first thing is have them do the work to pick the situation.
Yeah.
So you can define the situation, but get them to do the work to bring you the coaching session. So in other words, you don't need to work harder to catch them in the act of selling. You need to say, look, hey, I think the best situation for us to work together is let's record a meeting with a new customer. So if they're having a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, whatever, record that session. And I want you to have you're going to have a virtual meeting with a brand new customer. I want you to record that meeting. I want to see your best effort. This isn't about catching you. This is about putting you in a situation where we're going to see your best effort. So you record it and you bring it to me, and then we'll work on that. And you can, as a coach, you can review it beforehand, or you can review it with them, depending on the time that you have.
Yeah.
If that's a challenge, then what you can do is create simulations. Either they can video themselves talking to you or making a presentation. You can create role plays and record it on a phone and then play back so there's a lot of ways to do that. But you create the situation versus hunt for the situation, and that'll save you time.
Well, and if you're wondering, how does the customer feel about you recording the Zoom meeting? We've run into this a lot. I've done this myself, and I've had people do this to me when they try to sell to me. You provide another centered benefit of recording the call for the customer. Mr. Customer, you don't have to take notes. If you allow me to record this, I'll forward you the exact same recording that I'm going to keep. And that way, you know exactly what we talked about, and neither one of us has to take notes, and we can just talk. And so there's another centered reason for the recording. And of course, the self-centered reason is you're going to use it to improve with your manager as well.
Great point,
Final
Scott.
question regarding the coaching section is, and I love this, this is a great sort of way to wrap everything up from the top portion of the program here. What are the top 2 or 3 mistakes leaders make when coaching sellers?
Top 2 or 3. Well, the first one we were talking about today is they coach people that are unwilling to change. So we'll set that aside, but that's the number one. Number 2, and we've kind of alluded to this, is that they're not building a plan. Coaching is a tip. Coaching is more around delivering tips and not a development plan. A great example of this is if you've ever met with a doctor, a lot of times you just walk in, you say, I got this problem, I got a problem with my back, I got some health problem, and they just meet with you, and then they address the issue, give you a couple of tips, and then you leave, and most likely you don't come back. But a couple of years ago, I walked into a chiropractor's because I was having a consistent problem with my back, and the chiropractor basically said, here's what we need to do over the next 6 months, and this is how many sessions we're going to work on together. And we're going to go through these stages. This is what's going to happen at the end of this 6-month process, and it's going to cost this much money. Do you want to do it? And I was like, I signed up. He laid the whole thing out for me. We need to do the same thing with the rep. It doesn't need to be a tip, catching them in the act of selling, and then, hey, think of it this way. Hey, think of it this. No, we're building a wall, and we've got to put one brick at a time on that wall, and it's going to take maybe 30 days, maybe 2 months to develop a new habit. And so once they build the new habit, you don't have to work on it anymore. Like once they build a habit of discovery precedes build value, you will never have to have that conversation again. They will have to unlearn that. So that's the key, is to look at the coaching as developing a skill and stick with it until it's done. And then the last of what I would say is, when you diagnose performance, is another, I guess, the number 3 as far as the top mistakes.
Right.
When people diagnose performance, they focus on behavior, not capability. And here's what I mean by that. There's 50 plus behaviors, and they're very difficult to quantify. It's like, what type of questions did you ask? And everybody argues about what type of question and should it be a question, or you didn't do a good job delivering this presentation, or you didn't listen, or you're not focused on the customer, and all those things are debatable. But if you distill down how you diagnose behavior into capabilities that are measurable, so if you think about golf, and I know you may not like sports analogies, but this one works really well. If you think about golf and driving the golf ball, whether you are good at golf, whether you can be a great coach at golf, it doesn't really matter. You know that driving the golf ball, you're capable at driving the golf ball if the ball lands in the fairway. You don't need to worry about stance or swing or position of your feet or what club you chose. If the ball goes a certain distance and it lands in the fairway, you are capable. Check box. So then no one argues about that because it's very easy to measure that. Now, that's not the result of golf is getting a certain score, but the capability is the ability to drive. So, for example, in selling, a capability might be, sticking with the analogy we've used so far, discovery. Well, you would measure someone's ability to discover based on, did the customer reveal information? And so that's the way you want to, don't look at questions they ask, or did they listen, or did they, what are the types of questions, or did they, all you care about is the outcome. Now, if the outcome didn't occur, then you want to start looking at the behavior. So focus on capabilities, and then look at behaviors. And that's something that, if, you know, Scott, if people reach out to us, we've got some templates and tools to help people and written about this, and we're happy to share that because you may need more information
Absolutely.
about that.
Very
so hopefully
good.
that's helpful.
Super helpful. Super helpful. Why don't we make the shift over to the left side of the model here? You know, the independents and detractors. What's the best strategy for these folks? If we're not going to coach them, what should we do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. What do we do with the independents and detractors? So if we don't coach them, what do we do? So the first thing we need to think about is people call themselves sales manager, or they call them sales leader, and those are really misnomers. We really wear three hats. We wear three hats as a sales leader. We either lead, manage, or coach. So coach, we talked about. Coach is about diagnose and align and develop. And the goal as a coach is to develop their capabilities, okay? Well, so we only coach drivers and achievers. So what do we do with independents and detractors? We lead and manage them. So manage, let's uncover that first. Manage is clearly communicating what the line is and where are they, and are they following the plan that they should have created to hit their number. So it's all about what do they need to do, right, to hit their number, not with how well they do it. That's about coaching. But what do they need to do? What are the processes and what are the metrics they need to follow? So the first thing you want to have with the independents and detractors is a management meeting. Like, where are we related to the line? Okay, it's independent, you are above the line, got that. And so maybe we don't really need to do anything else with them related to manage. Detractors are below the line, so we need to make sure they're clear on where they are and where they need to be, okay? Now, that shouldn't take very long at all. Right, that's just a simple conversation that can happen. Now, there may be some debate about that, but that's a simple conversation that we need to have. But what we really need to do and spend our time, the best investment is where you put on the lead hat, which is where you want to create the desire. So let's talk about how to do that. The first question we need to ask when we put on the lead hat and we want to motivate the independents and detractors, and we want to get them to move from independent to achiever or detractor to striver, is we need to ask this question: are they open or are they closed? And let me tell you why. Let me just explain why that's such an important question. When someone's emotionally closed, the more you try to persuade them, the more closed they become. In other words, their willingness to listen is more important than your ability to communicate. And so as leaders, when we step into the room and we're like, they're not hitting their number and they're not doing what we typically do, probably because we have a background in sales, we're probably very persuasive, is we want to make our argument. We want to go to court and we want to say, here's why it's in your best interest to listen to me and change, because you're going to lose your job, or maybe, if we look at the line and the independents are above the line, we're like, look, that's not going to keep working. And we want to make our case. Well, here's the point. If someone's emotionally closed and you continue to make that argument, they become more closed, not open. So think of it as either the soil, you got the soil and the seed. If the soil's not fertile and you want to plant the seed, it's not going to germinate. You got to first create a fertile soil before you plant the seed, which is your message. So let's talk about how do we create that fertile soil? How do we create the receptivity before we deliver our message? I'll offer 3 little things to think about. So the first thing is we need to be other-centered. So the second question you need to ask, so the first question is, are they open or closed? Second question is, what do they want? What do they want? You cannot motivate somebody unless you know what they want. Motivation is always a wanting problem, not a discipline problem. Until you can attach change to something they want, they're not going to change. Change is hard. You've got an independent that's probably been with you for a long time. They're a veteran. They've been doing it the same way. Change, they're not going to change unless it's tied to something they want. Self-centered leaders walk into a meeting and they focus on what they want. Hey, I want you to get your number up because you're below the line. And when you're below the line, my team's below the line. And when my team's below the line, I'm not going to get my bonus. No one's motivated by your goals. Well, reps are only motivated by their goals. Now, they're never going to tell you that, but that's the truth. Other-centered leaders focus on helping people get what they want. They will follow you if you are for them. But if it's all about you, they don't care. So the first thing you need to do to motivate them is find out what they want. Second, we need to take the trip. And we need to take the trip and validate their point of view. And now we've got a great clip that we love to show in training when we deliver workshops on this that really demonstrates this idea of take the trip. So instead of me talking you through it, I want to show you this clip. So in this clip, Robert Duvall is the chief. What is he? The chief, the pit crew.
The crew chief. Yeah.
Crew chief. That's what it is. I'm sorry, I blanked on it. Crew chief. I say pit crew sometimes, but that's not correct. So he's basically the coach. He's the coach, and Tom Cruise is the hot shot driver. Tom Cruise does not want to change, and he wants Robert Duvall to change the car, and Robert Duvall, the coach, wants Tom Cruise to change the way he drives, and they just have been arguing. They keep losing races, and so Tom Cruise is a detractor, and Robert Duvall keeps trying to basically talk him into changing, and it doesn't work. So let's watch this clip, and then we'll debrief it.
There's nothing I can't do with a race car.
Well, that's the difference between you and me. There's only so much I can do.
That's obvious.
Harry, he doesn't need to appreciate your job to do his.
Well, he sure as hell does. How can he expect to race if he don't know what a race car can and can't do? What is this, huh?
You want me to work the pit and you drive? Fine, we'll try that.
I can't talk to this. I can't talk to this. I can't.
Think he can drive?
Oh, he can drive. He can drive beyond the limits of the tires, the engine, the car, anything else. If there's something to me, we wouldn't hardly ever lose a race.
They don't give us a sponsor in the next couple of races. My ass is fried. I'm liable to be out of the car business altogether. And Harry, I know you're great. You know you're great. But if the guy in the car doesn't trust you, we're never going to win a damn race.
Hey, Harry.
We gotta talk, all right?
All right, Harry, talk.
No. On the radio during a race. Now, you want to run right on the ragged edge all the damn time, you gotta tell us what's going on with the car.
Well, you just want to change the way I drive it.
Maybe.
Well, maybe you could set up the car so I don't have to change.
Well, I'd be happy to. You just tell me how.
Well, what do you want to know?
Well, hell, Cole, you're the driver. If you think she's running loose or tight, tell us. We give a turn here, take some wedge out there, we'll win some races. That's all there is to it.
I can't do that.
Well, why the hell not?
Because I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, how do you mean that? hey, Cole, that don't make you a damn bit different from any driver I ever met.
No, I mean, I really don't know. I don't know what you just said about a turn here and wedge there. I don't know. I don't know.
How could that be?
What's the difference? They told me to get in the car and drive, and I could drive. Point is, I'd like to help out, but I can't. I'm an idiot. I don't have the vocabulary.
Well, then we're just gonna have to figure one out, aren't we? Don't worry about it.
That clip. This is a great illustration of how we need to take the trip and the importance of taking the trip. So Robert Duvall's up here, right? He's basically saying you need to change the way you drive. If you change the way you drive, we'd win more races. He's at the North Pole. He sees this way is up, right? And this is the way we are. And as a leader, as a coach, we see this way is up. And of course, if you think of this as the world and you're up here on the North Pole, of course that's the way it's up. Well, the other person's down here and he says, no, you just need to change the car. If you change the car and I could drive the way I want to, then we'd win more races. And so they go back and forth. He communicates his point of view, and then Tom Cruise communicates his point of view. And guess what? Nothing happens. So how do we get this person to see our point of view? You walk in the room, and every time you walk in the room and you meet with an independent or you meet with a detractor, there's two polarized points of view, the way they see the world and the way you see the world. And so the more you talk about your point of view, the more they're going to defend their point of view. So how do we get the detractor independent to see our point of view? We need to go first, just like Robert Duvall did. We need to come down here, take the trip, stand beside them, and listen to them. And until we can articulate their point of view as well or better than they can, they're never going to come back and see our point of view. And so how do you know to do that? First thing that needs to happen is you need to have an oh moment. You need to have an oh moment where you go, oh, that's why you haven't changed, or that's why you believe what you need to believe. And this is where empathy happens. This is where the emotional temperature of the room changes. This is where you change, is when you humbly come down here and take the trip. You hear their point of view and you go, oh, because if there's a reason that they're doing something in the opposite of the way you want to do it, there's a reason they're doing that. And if you don't understand it, it's because you're missing some information. So when you have this oh moment, you go, oh, that's why. It demonstrates you respect them, you validate their point of view, and what they think and feel is important. Now, you feed that back to them because they don't know you validated them until you've actually fed it back to them. So now you feed it back to them, and they're going to say exactly. And those are the two magic words that need to occur before you're ever able to actually influence them. So you've got to validate their point of view before you can ever get them to see their point of view. And when you take this trip and you invest in them, just like Tom Cruise, I know it's a movie, but it's true, they're going to be willing to see your point of view.
That is so good, Tom. I mean, so it sounds like it kind of way to summarize this is the first step to working with an independent or detractor is to make the decision to be other-centered, because we know you can't fake this stuff. You either are other-centered or you are self-centered. So you got to be other-centered. And the second thing is to take the trip, just like you just said. I mean, you got to come around and look at life through their point of view and be able to reach that oh moment for yourself, but hear the words exactly once you've repeated it back. I think really important part of the program here that we're talking about for people to grasp that.
And Scott, it's a great summary. And I also would stop for a moment and ask everybody to think about the relationships, the most important relationships in their life, because this doesn't just work at work; it works at home. So, and I tell you, it's harder to take the trip with the people that you have had the relationship with, or maybe your most important relationships are the relationships you've been in for a long time. Like the hardest place for me to take the trip is with my wife, because I've heard it before. And that may be a challenge for you. Maybe you probably do know what the detractor is going to say, and you're probably right. But this isn't about knowledge and rationale. It's not about what people know. It's about how people feel. And so you've got to get them to feel validated and get that emotional connection before, you can deliver the message. You can plant the seed. You got to get the soil fertile. Oh, there's one more thing we need to do, Scott.
Yep.
To create receptivity with the independents and detractors, is we've got to drop the rope, right? So if you think about, because of your position as a leader, you're in this kind of perceived tug of war. You want them to change. You want to pull them to your position. And because of that, they naturally want to pull back. Now, whether you are doing it or not doesn't matter. There's a perception that you're going to try to control them. Because you're above them in the pyramid, based on their perception, they're going to want to pull back. And so what we need to do is communicate that we're not in a tug of war, that we want to drop the rope. Now, the line is non-negotiable. What they need to accomplish is non-negotiable, right? Now, whether they work here, they choose to work here or not, is negotiable. They can decide to go somewhere else. But how they get there is up to them. Just like Robert Duvall said in the clip, after Tom Cruise said, well, maybe you can just set up the car so that I don't have to change the way, I drive. And Robert Duvall says, okay, well, just tell me what you want me to do. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And so he not only took the trip, but he dropped the rope. And in both of those situations, opened up the relationship, the receptivity balloon. And now they were able to talk about it. And if you look at the next scene, Tom Cruise had an aha moment and completely changed the way that he saw how to drive the car. So they had a breakthrough. So two key things, or I should say 3 things to create receptivity when you're working with the independents and detractors. First, be other-centered, figure out what they want, build it around what they want. If, by the way, what they want doesn't align with what you're doing in the organization, then you need to have the conversation and say, this isn't a fit. You're not a bad person. This role just isn't right for you because we're moving in this direction and you want to move in that direction. So therefore, what do you want to do about it? Take the trip, validate their point of view, communicate back to them so that they say exactly, and then drop the rope and say, hey, look, I don't care how you get there. That's up to you. I'm here to help. But again, the line is non-negotiable.
Well, that's great. I mean, and who says we can't learn stuff from movies? My mother used to tell me you can't learn anything from movies. We're learning a ton from these movies. Let's assume that maybe when Tom did make a few changes, they went on to win some races. I don't want to give the movie away, but
don't give it away. Spoiler alert. I mean, would it come out in the 80s? I don't know. It's an old movie.
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in there. Well, let's if you're okay, Tom, let's move on to some more questions. And I've got a few here that came in the pre-registration, but Gerhard's compiling any that come in the live time. This first question is, how do you have patience to coach excuse makers when failure is never their fault or success isn't possible? Interesting question.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we've been talking about. I love that question. The blame shifters. And I know, as we've talked about some of these strategies, you're thinking, yeah, but it's probably not going to work. And that's true. For some people, they're just not willing to change. But what we want to do is create the best scenario or have the right approach, the best approach. And so the first thing we obviously need to do is validate their point of view. The first thing we always do is take the trip. All right. Instead of arguing, we need to seek first, as Covey said, to understand before we're understood, take the trip and validate their point of view, just like we talked about. The second is we need to speak the truth in love, right? This is where you are. This is where you need to be. And if you're not there by this date, right, then this is what's going to happen. I don't want that to happen. I will miss you, but this is what will happen. This is where the organization is going. So, and because what they're doing is they're blame shifting. They're saying, hey, well, I can't do that or blah, blah. It's like that may be true. But the point is, this is what's required to be in this role. The third thing I would do is ask the question, do they want to get better? Like, just boldly ask the question, are you willing to change? I want people to verbalize. So once people will verbalize their position, I'm not willing to change. Because they're going to say, well, we need to do that, or so-and-so did this, or the company should do this, or if we did better marketing, or if you did this, or it's never their fault, and which can be super annoying. And you just set all that aside and say, and you can even say, that's probably a lot of what you said is true. The point is, are you willing to change?
Yeah.
Do you want to get better?
Yeah.
Because what I'd like to do is what I always want to say to that person is go, okay, well, let's look at all the people that in the same situation or in the same role are successful. Therefore, you're wrong, because I just want to make my, but I need to go through those steps first to get them to the point to say, yes, I am willing to change. I'm willing to take ownership for what I can control. Great. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to spend time with people who are successful, and you're going to figure out, right, what they're doing. And I think that can be helpful.
Well, and what this all comes down to is when a rep and a coach look at each other as a team versus, adversaries, right?
Yeah.
In that moment where the rep totally trusts the manager, the coach, that they're on the same team, striving for the same thing. Now that results line is something we're going to help achieve together. It's not me telling you, you've got to get over that line, figure it out, right? We're going to figure that out together. And I think that's such an important mind shift that needs to go on in the minds of both the coach and the rep.
Exactly. Yeah. Great point.
Oh, wait,
Scott.
you just said exactly.
Point.
So I repeated that back perfectly.
Oh, yeah, I did. I didn't even know it. But it was true. Exactly.
All right. Next question. This is a perfect question given what we've been through for the last year. How do you keep remote sellers engaged?
Yes, that is a challenge. And because I think the challenge, if it's just related to remote, it's more of an emotional issue, meaning they're feeling disengaged.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that the problem isn't that they're not intrinsically motivated in the first place. So in other words, if they're intrinsically motivated, then working from home, working at the office doesn't matter. If they're waking up in the morning saying, I want to hit my number, I want to get better, then whether they're working at home or working in the office is immaterial. But if they were intrinsically motivated prior to the pandemic and now they're struggling with being motivated at home, that tells you that it's more of an emotional issue. They're lonely, they need more emotional support. And so I think the best prescription is to give them that, is to figure out how can you have more meetings, more touch points, bring them into the team, do what you need to do to keep them connected, because it's more of a relational need than it is an intellectual issue or what to do need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does make sense. It does make sense. And there's a positive side to this, and I like this question because it sort of spins it on its head a little bit. What 3 things do you always look for in a superstar salesperson?
Yeah, and hey, before I answer that question, I just have another thought about that question, Scott, as you brought it up. It could also be that they were much more organized. The rep that's no longer engaged at home, and speaking back to that question, yeah. They were much more organized when they were at the office, and now they're scattered. So it may mean that they need a little more management support and planning to be successful in this new environment. But I'm assuming that that's probably been addressed by this point. But if it hasn't, that could be part of the solution, is to help them be more structured. Like they were structured at work, now they're not structured. So that's potentially something to think about. That's good. So yeah. Superstar, back to the last question you asked about superstar salesperson. We like to look at 4 C's when hiring. So this would be helpful for you when you think about your team. 4 C's: career. Is it a career fit, cultural fit, competency, and character? So career fit is it in their best interest to take this job? Because people will try to sell you on a job. They want a job, whether it's the best job or not, they want the job. Like they'd rather be looking for a job while they're working with you than they would not have a job. So they're always going to want the job. It's up to us to make a decision. Is it in their best interest to take this job? Is this are they moving backwards or moving forwards? And so if it's not a career fit, I'm concerned. Cultural fit, it's just, are they going to jive with your environment? Every culture has a personality. And are they going to fit with the personality? Some organizations are very rigid culture. It's very numbers driven. Other cultures are touchy feely. As a friend of mine said, they're emoji culture. And so, it's like work from home, be in the office. I mean, all kinds of different cultures. So is it a cultural fit? Character. So here's where I'm going to get a little bit more specific. Character, two simple things, character, hungry and humble. Are they hungry and humble? Are they willing to do what they need to do to be successful? And that's an easy thing to uncover in an interview. Hungry and humble. Now, humble may not be. The hungry piece is a little bit more because you can just look at past behavior and see what they've overcome to be successful. Humble, willingness to take feedback, that's a little bit more difficult. So hungry and humble. And then under the competency piece, the number one thing I would say, unless you sell something that's very tactical and easy to understand, the number one thing I would say is their ability to think conceptually. In other words, they're not a linear thinker. They're a conceptual thinker, because customers go all over the place. We have multiple solutions and multiple recommendations. Customers can say multiple things. They can go in multiple directions. We've got to manage all that information. So the ability to think conceptual and see all of that and bring it together is a critical talent that you want to hire for.
Excellent.
Gerhard, I bet you've got some wisdom to share on that subject.
G squared back in the house. Oh, I think Gerhard's
You're on mute, my friend.
All right, I think that we have to extend the webinar by at least a day because we have so many questions. One really interesting question by somebody named Henrik. He says, how do managers succeed in communicating the role change from manager to coach? And I think it's a very subtle shift in probably identity, but also in intention.
So repeat that again, Gerhard. So how do they succeed in their transition?
You're wearing two hats. You're a manager, and then you shift the conversation and the dynamics by engaging in a coaching conversation. And when you make that shift, there's something that needs to click in your head where you change your attention by paying greater attention to what the other person is saying and listening, go from the North Pole to the South Pole.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know I've said that a lot. These are really good questions. That is, if you've been managing for a long time, you have a rhythm with the rep, and they know exactly what's going to happen. You're going to meet, you're going to go over the numbers, you're going to talk about what you need to do, we're going to look at the pipeline, and we're going to talk about next thing. I'm going to give you a couple of tips. Meeting's going to be over, and we're going to ask about the family, and that's it. And it's a rhythm, and you've been doing the same thing with the same people all the time. Now, all of a sudden, you're saying, well, I want to coach, and coach is different. And coaching means I got to observe, and I don't normally observe you. And then we're going to have a conversation about what's going to change, and then we're going to come up with a development plan. And they're going to go, well, that's weird. You're being completely different. So what I would do is make that about your gap, not their gap. So if you're taking the shift from manager to coach, I would say it this way. I've always managed you, and you really don't need much management. I need to do a better job of supporting you as a coach, right? So I need to roll up my sleeves and figure out how we can help you get from here to here. And yes, we've talked a lot about productivity and the numbers, but I've been working on my own development. And I've realized that I've got a gap as a coach, and I'm going to work on that. So I'm going to have a couple of missteps, and I'm going to probably move back into the management role naturally. But I'm working to be better for you, to help you and to support you, versus this is about me. Because when we feel uncomfortable, we typically it's just like me making this presentation. When I'm uncomfortable, my focus is on me. When I'm excited and motivated, I'm focused on how can I help you. And so if there's some fear related to that, it's probably because you're focused on self. And that's fine. We all do it. I mean, we can't help but default to self, but that's the best way to communicate it. And the way I think about it is turn the pyramid upside down. So the normal traditional pyramid, right? You're at the top as a leader and the reps at the bottom and the customers below them. Turn the pyramid upside down and say, look, I work for you. My role is to support you and help you get better. And I need to do a better job doing that, right? So, because I'm not successful unless you're successful. And your ultimate role is to serve the customer. So I'm going to help you do a better job of serving the customer.
It's a good answer. I just want to read a couple of comments that are really interesting. Jose says, I love that movie. Great point. People are mostly motivated when they see what's in it for me in the process. Wow, that was such a great learning moment for me. And somebody just a comment, best sales webinar I've attended in years. I have been in the
Yes.
business as a coach for over 20 years. And thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Jose.
Maybe we need some interpretation, but what do you do when you feel like you keep taking the trip without discovering what they want?
Oh, what do you do when you keep taking the trip without discovering what they want? I would say you need to keep feeding it back to them until they say exactly, because that's something I do with my wife a lot. You know, I'll say, "Oh, I get what you mean," and I want to end the conversation there. Versus, let me repeat it back to you, and then you keep. Now, if what's happening is they keep shifting, and they don't really, you know, they're in denial and they don't want to really reveal what they really think, then I would just call it. I would just say, "I'm trying to understand you, and you keep changing what you're saying, so I'm confused. So maybe this could be a developmental activity. Why don't you think a little bit more about what's most important to you related to this topic? Gather your thoughts, and and it could be me, but gather your thoughts, and then let's get together on Wednesday and let's talk about it, because I'm hearing a lot of different things and I'm a little confused and I don't want to be confused."
Well, and Tom, one thing I might add there is sometimes people just get confused and can't articulate things verbally, but maybe they can in writing. And so if you say go back as a development opportunity and write down what you are trying to achieve, now that's something that we can come back and look at together. Not because I'm giving you homework just to give you, busy work. This is, what in your mind is most important, and now I can help articulate that to me, because we've been wrapped around the axle.
And the bottom line is, I love that, Scott. The bottom line is it needs to be their coaching session. This is their session. You're not dragging them into the session and saying, let's work on this. They need to be dragging you into the session. And so we tend, as a manager, leader, coach, want to work harder than they do. And when we do, they relax and we amp up because we want it more than they do. And so we've got to go. So I'm struggling to understand what you're saying. Great point, Scott. Why don't you go work on it, write it out, because I want to understand it. And if they don't want to do that, then obviously there's a desire problem, and they need to own that.
Yeah, I think that there's a need for another term. The term relationship between salesperson and coach, or salesperson and manager. I think what we need is like a relationship where we
I like that.
Abandoning the traditional banter about the numbers, but where we have a heart-to-heart conversation, where we become more vulnerable, where we show a lot more empathy, and create that aha moment. Oh, now I see your side of the world or your side of the story, and we can co-create a better future.
That's really good.
I love co-create. Yeah, it really is. It is pretty simple when you think about it. We typically operate in two dimensions. There's the results as the center dial, right? And then what needs to happen to achieve those results? It's desire, productivity, and competency. Well, most people just focus on the results dial and then the productivity. And they're two-dimensional because that's easy. And it's not the relationship, as you say. We also need to spend time over the desire dial. And that's where we put that lead hat on. And you're right. People will be uncomfortable if they're not normally they're not used to putting on that lead hat. But nothing happens or nothing changes without desire. Until that spark occurs, you're just working hard on something that's not going to have any impact on performance.
Yeah.
And so that's where we need to. And so if you're uncomfortable with that, then that's obviously this is, our hour's up, but that's something There's a lot of resources that we can offer or other organizations can offer to help you build that ability.
And actually, as I see some people are probably running to their next meetings, we do have a parting gift for the group in the form of a coaching grid that you can actually take and download. You'll get an email in the next day or so, and you can write the initials of your team where you think they are in the coaching grid, and it's got some great explanation of how to decide who to put where. And we hope that that's something that gets your mind working and gets you started toward coaching and eliminating the number one coaching problem that people run into: time.
Yeah, it's like a diagnostic tool, and somebody was asking for that, and a number of people were asking the same question, so I want to give everybody the same answer. Yes, we recorded this webinar today, and we will make the recording available by sending out an email with a link to the recording so you can review it again. And I want to apologize. A couple of people were having sound issues when the video was playing, but we want to make sure that when we send out the recording, that sound works, so you can review it, enjoy the video, enjoy the lessons, and share it with your peers.
Excellent.
Well, I want to thank everybody
Thank you, Gerhard.
Especially my friend from Germany. There were people from other countries, not just the United States and Canada.
Excellent.
Wonderful.
We've enjoyed it. Thanks, Gerhard.
Oh, that makes me miss travel, Gerhard. That makes me miss travel.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be back.
Yes, soon, hopefully.
Soon.
All right. Stay safe and be productive.
Thank you, my friend. Good to see you again.
Good
Thanks,
to see
Scott.
you, Todd and Tom.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.